Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining this special session that I've created. Let me tell you what's going on here. I had one of my clients, Janelle, that said, "Hey Wayne, it would be great if I had a cheat sheet, something to remind me what questions to ask at each one of the steps." So I've gone ahead and created a short little presentation here, and I think you should just write down each one of these three things at each step of the system to kind of have as a cheat sheet when you meet with somebody to remind you to ask questions. Of course, there's more questions one should ask than what I'm going to show you, but this will give you just an example of things we should start talking about. Make sure that you have like a checklist, if you will. So again, remember the S in the step system is size up the situation and manage their expectations. So it's part of the bonding and rapport. It's setting the expectations of how long this meeting is going to take, what you want to get out of it. So here's some things to remind somebody to start with. Can you walk me through your current situation? All right. What prompted you to take this conversation or take this meeting today? It's a pain primer, that question is a little bit, but what would you like to get out of our time today? Remember when we talk about establishing the expectations, our time, how much time do we have? Really, what would be on your agenda? What would you want to get out of this meeting? Now, remember, the first thing a client brings to you is never the real problem. So we dig a little deeper. So that's why we say, what else this would be a great meeting if when I end this meeting today, what would you need to get out of this meeting to say, wow, I'm glad that I came in today to talk to you. All right. Then we want to talk about the likely outcome. What would you like to get out of our time today? Most clients are going to say something like, well, I just want to get your price. Do you mind if I share with you what I need out of this to be able to give you a price? I fully need to understand the scope of the project. I fully need to understand your budgetary restrictions. I fully need to understand your time element when you need to have all this done. And once I fully establish and understand, what the real problem is, what it's going to take to fix the problem from your end, and we really understand what's going on, then I could do a better job at the presentation step. So here's some three questions that help you size up the situation. Then the T, remember the T in this is take the prospect to their problem or their pain. So what challenges are you running into? Where are things not working as you expected? And then the impact. How is this impacting your results? How is this personally impacting you? So you can do the mnemonic, the pain funnel we talked about before. Tell me more. I need more information. How long has this been a problem? What have you done to fix this problem? Were you happy with those results? How much does this problem cost you? Is that a little? Is that a lot? How does that make you feel? What would you like me to do about it? But if you forget that mnemonic that I taught you, then this is how you can go through and remember some of the questions and take into their pain. Then the E, remember the E is extend that problem into the future. What happens if this continues? Or what happens if you're able to solve this? Let's pretend it's a year from now. Describe for me what your situation is like because today you decided to take action and move forward. Or describe for me a year from now what your situation like if you don't do anything right now. If you choose not to, if you choose status quo, tell me how you're feeling a year from now. How will this affect your revenue or your time or your stress level if we're able to solve the problem? What's the cost of not solving this problem? A lot of salespeople, they rush the benefits and features and they paint this wonderful picture of how they can solve the problem. But it really, you can't, you're not selling a product or service. You're selling outcomes. So what's the cost of not having a good outcome? What's the cost of not solving this problem? These are three questions. Again, as I said before, you should probably write these down, go back to this, have these printed off just right in front of you to remind you to check off these questions. And you can even start and say, hey, at each one of these steps, we're going to ask you three questions just to help me stay on target for what you need. So that's what I have here is just a checklist to remind me to ask you certain questions at each step as we go through this process. Then the P is propose a solution. What would an ideal solution look like? What would this allow you to do differently? Would you be open to seeking how I could help you? It may be a different way that you thought of. Maybe you should add that to this because that sounds a little bit too bland. Just would you be open to seeing how we can? Well, of course I am because I was here. What if I have some out of the box thinking? What if I have some ideas that really haven't really been in your mind a solution, but something that I see we can do. Are you open to having a conversation about some alternative methods to solve your problem? Again, people can't get mad at you for doing something they gave you permission to do. So at each one of these steps, what we're trying to do is give you some questions to remind you to ask questions for the client. So you have these questions written down and you can refer back to them. And then the last slide in this short little training is the goal is not to tell. If you're telling, you're not selling, but it's to guide this person. Remember, you're the tour guide and you're conducting this tour by asking better questions. And the more the prospects then ends up convincing themselves instead of you trying to convince the prospect by asking questions. So I hope that these three questions at each one of the steps helps you to come up with a systematic approach to making sure you ask the questions at each one of the steps. And even if you don't like the questions that I had, I recommend that you at least show the client, hey, here's my step system. We're going to talk about what your situation is. All right. We're going to manage whatever the expectations you might have. Then we're going to talk in detail about the problem that you have. So I fully understand what it is that we're trying to solve. Then we're going to talk about what happens if you don't solve this problem in the future if we don't do anything about it. And when I fully understand all those things, then I can do a better job of coming up with a solution. I didn't walk in here with a preconceived notion of how I'm going to sell you. I came out here with trying to just get an idea of what it is that's really going on so that when I get to the presentation step, that I can do a much better job. So I hope those questions at each one of the four steps helps remind you to stay in each one of those steps before you move on this next step. And again, take these three questions at each one of the four steps, but expand on it in your own mind, but have them written down. You know, the mind is a wonderful, fantastic thing until you get in front of somebody, then you forget all these questions. So there's nothing wrong with having a piece of paper, a call briefing in advance, a pre-call planner, if you will, to go through. So again, this is Wayne Dean with 3D Sales Training. Appreciate you joining us today. And if you haven't signed up for our Facebook group, go to our group is facebook.com/groups/question-led selling. And that's a great place to send somebody too if you want to give us a referral. Thank you very much. Appreciate you guys very much.